Turning to a major development in the e-commerce sector, Kentucky has filed a lawsuit against the rapidly growing online retailer Temu, alleging serious breaches of consumer privacy, cybersecurity violations, and intellectual property theft. The state's attorney general claims that Temu's popular shopping app, which skyrocketed to become Apple's most downloaded in 2023, provides the Chinese government with virtually unlimited access to Americans' user data. The complaint asserts that Temu deliberately designed its app to evade detection while harvesting sensitive information such as users' Wi-Fi and GPS data, as well as camera access, often without explicit permission. Additionally, Kentucky accuses the company of selling merchandise adorned with stolen logos and branding from iconic local institutions, including the University of Kentucky and Churchill Downs. State officials argue that Temu's parent company, PDD Holdings, operates under Chinese laws that could force it to surrender customer records to authorities in Beijing. Kentucky is seeking an injunction to prevent further alleged infractions amid rising consumer anxiety about foreign-owned digital platforms. The scrutiny comes as U.S.-China tensions persist over data security and intellectual property, and as American lawmakers and state attorneys general, mostly Republican, press international retailers on their ties to forced labor and their impact on local businesses. On July 16th, the Supreme Court issued an emergency order affecting North Dakota's contested electoral map. Justice Brett Kavanaugh placed a temporary hold on a lower court decision that had blocked voters in Arkansas, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, North Dakota, and South Dakota from suing over alleged voting discrimination under the Federal Voting Rights Act. The case was brought by the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa Indians, the Spirit Lake Tribe, and several Native American voters who argue that current districting dilutes the power of minority communities. The administrative stay gives the justices more time to review substantial questions around who has the right to bring Voting Rights Act lawsuits in federal courts. This interim order means North Dakota's disputed map remains in force, although the underlying legal issues remain unresolved. The Supreme Court's ultimate decision could set a precedent for how voting rights cases are handled in multiple states and affect the balance of electoral power across the Midwest, particularly in areas with significant indigenous populations. This development is part of a broader national debate on voting rights, as courts and lawmakers continue to grapple with the interpretation of federal protections designed to ensure equal access to the ballot box, especially for historically marginalized groups. The Supreme Court's move signals continued uncertainty for upcoming primaries and potentially for the general election, as states await clearer guidance on the reach of the Voting Rights Act and the ability of private citizens to raise legal challenges against alleged discrimination. In a significant move related to financial regulation, the U.S. House of Representatives has passed the Genius Act, formerly known as the Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins Act. The bill, which now awaits the President's signature, establishes the first comprehensive federal framework for regulating stablecoins, a type of cryptocurrency designed to maintain a stable dollar value. After passing the Senate with bipartisan support in June, the legislation overcame a series of procedural hurdles in the House, despite some intra-party disagreements impacting the debate. Stablecoins have been central to the expansion of decentralized finance and digital payments, leading to calls for clear regulatory guardrails to mitigate risks such as illicit finance, consumer fraud, and potential threats to monetary stability. Proponents argue the Genius Act will bolster innovation in the U.S. by establishing clear compliance standards for companies issuing or trading stablecoins, while critics worry it may stifle the competitive advantage American startups have developed in the crypto sector. With the federal government's involvement now poised to expand, the broader crypto industry is expected to face increased oversight, aligning the U.S. regulatory environment more closely with global financial standards. On Capitol Hill, A new Republican-led legislative proposal seeks to toughen the legal consequences for senior executives at publicly traded companies who knowingly employ undocumented immigrants. Senator Bernie Moreno's Safe Hire Act would require CEOs and Chief Human Resources Officers to certify annually in filings with the SEC that their companies have complied with federal employment eligibility laws. The act escalates penalties for deliberate violations, introducing the possibility of up to 10 years in prison and a $1 million fine for false certifications, and as much as 20 years in prison with a $5 million fine for employing unauthorized workers. The bill comes amid expanded enforcement by federal authorities, including recent high-profile raids on industries such as agriculture and cannabis. Moreno frames the legislation as a response to, in his words, economic exploitation of migrants and the need to prioritize American workers. The bill's supporters argue that holding corporate leaders personally accountable will deter illegal hiring and strengthen the integrity of the nation's workforce. Critics, meanwhile, contend that the focus should be on reforming the broader immigration system and question whether such punitive approaches address underlying labor market dynamics. Immigration policy remains a fiercely contested issue in Congress, intersecting with debates over border security, labor rights, and federal agency resources, highlighted most recently by the reconciliation bill that increased funding for immigration and customs enforcement. In San Francisco Bay, attention has turned to the historic Alcatraz Island after U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi and Interior Secretary Doug Burgum toured the former federal prison at President Trump's direction. The site visit was part of an official review to assess whether the prison, famously known as The Rock and shuttered since 1963, could be rehabilitated to house high-risk federal inmates. Trump first floated the idea in May, presenting the reopening as a symbol of renewed federal law enforcement strength. During their inspection, Bondi and Burgum evaluated the decaying infrastructure and discussed with National Park Service officials the feasibility of transforming the tourist landmark back into a maximum security federal prison. The island, now a popular national park drawing more than 1.5 million visitors annually, poses significant logistical challenges, including outdated utilities and compliance with modern accessibility and environmental standards. Historically, Alcatraz was renowned for its security. No confirmed successful escapes in its nearly 30 years as a prison, and its isolating geography. Current proposals suggest it could be used for the worst of the worst offenders, such as violent criminals and individuals convicted of serious federal crimes, as well as some non-citizen offenders. While legal experts acknowledge the administration's authority to reopen the facility, they caution such a move could trigger an avalanche of lawsuits and opposition from California officials. House Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi and Governor Gavin Newsom have criticized the plan, calling it politically motivated. The Justice Department's ongoing communication with California sheriffs about the release of undocumented migrants from state prisons is said to be unrelated, but it underscores the administration's broader focus on law and order. A final decision on Alcatraz's future has not been announced, and any potential reopening would face both legal battles and administrative hurdles, as well as strong public scrutiny amid its legacy and iconic place in American culture.